So let's first determine what is a near-death experience. Most near-death experiences occur in a situation of a medical critical situation, like an operation or an accident. And people who have had a near-death experience, they feel that they have been on the doorstep or even beyond the doorstep of heaven. And and they have seen a lot of unearthly things. Now, I believe that what they have experienced is a first glimpse of the continuation of consciousness after death. You don't have to believe that in order to understand that there are medical and especially psychological implications to having a near-death experience. And what I'd like you to understand is that a near-death experience is not easy. If you have had a near-death experience, it's not easy to cope with because it turns your world upside down. It really turns your world upside down. And you have to just bear with me and understand that that's the case. So it really changed your point of view. And you have to be aware that sometimes people have a trauma because of the near-death experience. Not in all cases, but in some. And in some cases more severe than in others. And it's also important for you to understand that the medical profession has acknowledged the existence of near-death experiences, but has not acknowledged yet that it's a real experience with a life-changing effect on the patient. Nevertheless, there are scientists who came to understand that and have accepted that it's really a serious experience with a life-changing effect. There has also been good and acclaimed research into near-death experiences, and I will mention a few of them. Maybe you know the study done by Pim van Lommel and the people around him. He did the first prospective study on near-death experience, so that's a really a study according to scientific methods. And this kind of study was rerun in the United States and in Britain with the same kind of outcome. Everyone can have it, so also you could have it too, but there are a number of preconditions to have it. So most often they occur in, as I said, in a medical critical situation, like an operation that went wrong at some point, or in a severe accident. But not only in those cases it can happen. There have been many cases of people who have been in an existential crisis or a psychological crisis and were really rock bottom, really severely affected. They could be in a situation that something like that occurs. There have been many cases of those. Near-death experiences have also been reported by people who have been in a very deep meditation, although I don't hear too many of those cases. And even there are reports of people who have had an NDE in a spontaneous way. So even sitting on a beach, and that's really a case that that comes to my mind, someone had a near-death experience. Now it starts with an out-of-body sensation. That's what the people say. They leave their body, they can see their body, they wander around, and then sometimes they go through a tunnel, they see light, they see the light, they see light beings, they see deceased relatives, but often, very often, they talk about that they have experienced pure perfection, pure peace, and pure unconditional love. What they also often, most of them that I speak, say that they also felt a profound interconnectedness with everyone around them, everyone in the world, but not only with people, but also with animals and with nature. It is also a well-established fact that people change dramatically because it's an overwhelming experience. You can't just ignore it. If you think that happens to just a few people, then I can give you some numbers. In some studies it comes out that there are like 4 to 5% of the population in Western societies have had an NDE. 4 to 5%. Now in the Netherlands that would be something like 700,000 people. That's not just a few. You have to understand that. Some of the after effects I'd like to mention. The first one and predominant is that the fear of death disappears. People who have had a near-death experience are not afraid of dying anymore. Maybe, they are afraid of dying, the way in which they would die, but being dead is no problem for them because they are certain that they continue their journey afterwards. The feeling of timelessness is reported over and over again. Some people can not live by the clock anymore. They can't cope with schedules. They can't they have difficulties meeting appointments and things like that. They become hypersensitive to light, to sounds, and to medicine. They have a problem with being in crowds. They pick up emotions of others. That's what they say. They start relying on feelings rather than rationality in order to arrive at decisions. They feel that unconditional love is of most importance in everyone's life. They feel that we all belong to one big whole. We think we are separate, but they think that we are one of the same kind being all together. Now, what Sabine and I try to make clear here is that an NDE is not an illness with its symptoms and characteristics. It is just a complete change of perspective, of view of reality by the NDE of the world around, but also a change of what is important to the inner self. So the inner self changes as well. What they feel important is totally different from what they felt important before. As an example, money, power, if that was important before, after their near-death experience, that changes altogether. They feel disconnected from the old world. You have to understand that there is a seizure, or how do you say that, between the period before and after the NDE. There is really a cut. Before is different from after. And they can't ignore this. And if they ignore it, and we know a few cases also, if you ignore it, things will aggravate. It will get more difficult to be able to cope again. So the NDE has to adapt. There's no choice. In order to regain a good quality of life, integrate and accept it. Accept first and then integrate. And that sounds maybe easy, but it's not. First they need to accept it, and that can take years. And then they need to integrate it into their life. And that can take years too. And on average, it has been established that it takes us about 7 years. So some people go quicker, some people go slower. I know of someone who took 30 years to be able to be adapted to this world again with everything that we see around us and that we feel is normal. Like trams and trains and time schedules and everything. You have to imagine how that is for someone who has had such a severe experience. It is the feeling of being reborn again after the experience. And it is like a baby discovering a new world. The world is the same for us, nothing changed for us, but for them it's a total new world with new facets and everything. And that's what Sabine's therapy is about. She refers to it as the Babylook approach because it's like a baby looking around the world for the first time. Of course you see the same things, but they have a different meaning for the NDE. Now what do I do? What do I mean with this Babylook approach? The therapist needs to have a correct attitude towards the patient, and the correct attitude would be at least one of equality, being non-judgmental, accepting that the patient has a total different view of reality. It's changed thoroughly. And also that the therapist should be willing to explore together with the patient this new world. And of course the therapist doesn't have to adopt the view of the patient, but the therapist has to understand and work together in order for the patient to be able to explore the world as a baby would do. Helpful in this respect is also the mindfulness based cognitive therapy. It is reaching out with objectivity and without judgment, and using the Babylook approach as I just described. And that means that doctors and caregivers, but also family, friends, need to find a new approach to the NDE. Now, this is actually what NDEers think that's going on. They think that their consciousness is expanded from a local perspective, namely the head, to a non-local area. And I'll mention a few examples where the trauma could come from. First, some psychological examples. First one would be over-identifying with the NDE, which causes isolation and having problems with adapting to a normal time, a day-night rhythm. Patients can become or have the feeling that they are being looked at as crazy or mental unstable. Being felt that they are crazy might cut them off from the rest of society. The other thing what I mentioned was homesickness. Sometimes homesickness can really become very severe. They desperately want to go back to this place and they can't unless they commit suicide. Or loneliness because no one understands them. All these examples that I give are just symptoms of an NDE. They are not symptoms of a clinical illness. That's important to understand. And if you treat an NDEer as if they are clinically ill, then it would worsen the trauma. Sabine knows a number of cases in this respect. And her treatment will give them, is a different approach. It will give the NDEer a fresh start, accepting first and then integrating it in the experience into their own life. And as said before, it can take a very long time.